Good morning, everyone. I'm Shogo Tachibana, Vice President of the Geochemical Society. I hope that you have enjoyed this week of great science and the opportunity to catch up with old friends and meet new ones. Planning Goldschmidt is a multi-year process that involves hundreds of people working together to make it happen. I'd like to briefly recognize some of these people here. First, the local organizing committee planned the social events and excellent lunchtime workshops that run throughout the week. I want to thank Nagisa Mahmoodi, Meti Bendixson, Joshua Davis, Peter Douglas, Violem Ponson, and Benjamin Gwyneth for all their contributions to the meeting. Thank you. Next, the Science Committee guided the development of an excellent program that blended presentations from those attending in person and remotely. Thank you to James Brennan, Jay Cullen, Maria Dietrich, Ricard Arebaro, Tom Sisson, Holly Stein, Eva Stuken, Philip van Kaplan, and Dominic Weiss. Working with the Science Committee, more than 40 theme chairs organized the 14 themes that comprise the program. They began more than a year and helped craft a broad and balanced program that covers the wide array of geochemistry and related subjects. They also reviewed applications to the conference grant program. We thank them for their commitment and hard work. I also want to thank the conveners and chairs who proposed sessions, solicited, reviewed, and organized abstract, and led the sessions. We sincerely appreciate their time and expertise in putting together an excellent program. Thank you to all the volunteers who made this year's conference possible. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. As you have seen all the week, the student helper team is indispensable to this meeting. They are knowledgeable and friendly. That's something you notice every time you encounter them. The group this year did a truly excellent job, and I want to recognize Ed Amanati and the entire team. And this week has been full of great science. And I would like to remind you that all the posters and the oral sessions will be available on the conference website for 60 days. The recordings from Monday and Tuesday are already available on the website, and everything will be posted by next week. And now, I'd like to introduce Lenny Winkel to say a few words about next year's conference. Lenny, please.
Thank you, Shogo, and hello, everyone. I am Lenny Winkel, and together with Laurent Remouzat, I will be co-chairing the organizing and science committees for next year's Goldschmidt conference. Goldschmidt 2027 will take place from the 11th to the 16th of July in the city of Paris, in the heart of Europe. Our venue will be the Palais de Congrès, a modern and spacious conference center in the Port-Maillot quarter that is really easy to reach from the center of Paris. And the Science Committee and team chairs have put together a program structured around 12 themes, of which you can see the titles and the chairs on the conference website now. And as always, there will be many other activities, including workshops, programs for early career scientists, social and networking events, and a vibrant exhibition. And now I invite you to watch a short video where you will meet Laurent and can find out more about the 2027 conference. Hi everyone, this is Laurent, an isotope geochemist.
And this is Lenny, an environmental geochemist. Together we are thrilled to be co-chairing the next Goldschmidt conference here in Paris.
We are proud to welcome you on behalf of the European Association of Geochemistry and the Geochemical Society.
We're living in a time when geochemistry is absolutely crucial. From the oceans and atmosphere to our natural resources and environmental interfaces, our field holds the keys for understanding today's most pressing environmental issues.
And to tackle these challenges together, the Goldschmidt Conference serves as the beating heart of our community. It is simply the place to share new ideas, spark collaboration, and showcase groundbreaking research.
With over 4,000 delegates, we'll come together to Paris to explore the recent developments across all scales and spheres, from the distant past to the present days, from minerals to microbes, and from the deep earth to the far reaches of the solar system.
Goldschmidt offers fantastic opportunities to meet new people, reconnect with colleagues, and discuss exciting research ideas. For early career scientists, the conference features a diverse program with hands-on workshops and mentoring to fun events right on the Seine riverside.
Importantly, through the grant program, the European Association of Geochemistry and the Geochemical Society continue to support delegates with limited resources to ensure our community remains open and inclusive.
Getting to Paris is convenient via international airports and train stations. And once you arrive, reaching the conference center is straightforward, whether you prefer taking the metro, hopping on a bus, riding a bike, or walking the city streets.
Paris offers a wide range of accommodation and dining options, fitting all budget and all taste, from classic bistros and cafes to vibrant local markets. Adding the city's rich historical and cultural scenes, there is truly something for everyone to enjoy.
We are excited about this upcoming event, and we look forward to all your contributions, from sessions and workshops to posters and talks.
We can't wait to welcome you in Paris next July.
And in case you missed it at the end, note that the call for sessions and workshop proposals will open in early September and close on the 15th of October. We are very much looking forward to receiving your submissions to help us shape an exciting science program. Many thanks for your attention, and we hope to see many of you in Paris next year. And now I would like to invite James Brennan to the stage.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Brennan, and I am co-chair of the Science Committee. I would like to echo Shogo's comments and thank my colleagues on the Science Committee, the theme chairs, and all the session conveners. It has been a great week of science, and we thank you for making that possible. It is now my pleasure today to introduce our plenary speaker, Dr. Sarah Gordon. Dr. Gordon is the co-founder and CEO of Satarla Sustainability and Risk Management, co-founder of the not-for-profit Responsible Raw Materials, and the production company Critical Productions. She is also a professor of practice at Imperial College London and a board member of Women in Mining UK. Sarah started her career as an exploration geologist before moving into risk management and sustainability. She is regularly invited to advise organizations and governments on raw materials and is a member of the UK Government Expert Committee on Raw Materials. She works with many natural resource companies, including operators, investors, and innovators who work in the sector. She recently presented the award-winning documentary, 100 Perceptions, Raw Materials. Welcome, Sarah Gordon.
Thank you very much, James. Bonjour, Montréal. Je suis très désolée, je ne parle pas bien le français, so now I'm going to speak in English. I'm afraid, everybody, that's it in terms of my ability to speak French. So thank you so much, James, for the very kind introduction. And thank you very much to Dominique and the rest of the committee for giving me such an immense honor in inviting to come and speak to you all here today. I started out life, yes, as an exploration geologist, but actually more importantly as a cosmochemist. Oh yes, I spent my PhD looking at very small bits of rock that were very old, and just hoping that the ICP-MS didn't totally destroy itself whilst it was analyzing my samples, because there was zero repeatability with regards to those data sets. So, as James mentioned, I'm going to entertain you for the next 45 minutes or so and ask the question about critical raw materials. Is it possible for supply to meet demand? Now, critical raw materials are things that have hit the top of the news cycle. I don't think we've actually had something in the world of materials and geology that has perhaps been so prevalent in the world news or in geopolitics. But it's not all about the rocks, it's not all about the people. Actually, a lot of it is about what can we change in the world round about us to make sure that not only us, but everything else that's trying to live on our planet alongside us has a good time and a successful future. So with regards to this, as James mentioned, so yes, I've done a number of things with my life so far, but my real job is actually as chief tractor driver. So this is me at home during harvest time. I grew up in the northeast of Scotland. You might be able to detect the slight twang of a Scottish accent inside me. And this is what I spend generally between the 15th of August and the 15th of September-ish doing. So if I totally crash and burn standing here on this stage today, perhaps I'm a better tractor driver, let's hope. Over the last few weeks, though, I have been traveling around Peru and Chile with a film crew, which has been a bizarre experience. But the purpose of doing that is to try and capture footage and interview a wide range of people to truly understand raw materials and what the mining sector means to countries and regions like Peru and Chile. So this time last week, this was me. If we have any Chileans in the room here with us today, you might recognize that this is a chat show in Chile that I found myself on. It was the weirdest experience. Okay, no form of working in a clean lab prepared me for sitting on a chat show attempting to speak Spanish. It did not go well. I got one big laugh down the front. Thank you very much, sir. You're now my favorite person. Okay, so before we go any further, though, I would like to acknowledge where we are. I've told you a little bit about my home in the northeast of Scotland and where I've been, but all of us have spent the last few days here in Quebec. And of course, it's a very special part of the world with people who have lived here and made this their home for a very long period of time. So acknowledging where we are and that invitation with regards to us being here is incredibly important. But it's also incredibly important to acknowledge this. Does anyone recognize it? Hopefully we do. So yeah, this is our planet. And I know that there are many people in this room who spend their times looking out beyond our planet. But Earth is pretty special. And if we go back in time, so yes, approximately, note the big error bars, 4.56 billion years ago, this, of course, was perhaps what our little patch of space looked like, that swirling cloud of gas and dust and that protoplanetary disk, just waiting for all of us to try and work out how on earth did those planets form? So what were those theories that were going to come out of this? And of course, it was back then that rocks like this formed. Can anyone guess what this one is? Does anyone recognize it? It's one of the most studied meteorites. Yes, you got it. It's Allende. So that's what I spent almost the entirety of my PhD looking at. So it has a very special place in my heart. But we go from rocks like this that are incredibly old all the way through to rocks like that, those volcanoes in the far distance. Anyone here a volcanologist? Any volcanoes people? Okay, you're all sitting towards the back of the room. I don't know what that means. Okay, so I know that these volcanoes here on the edge of the Salar de Atacama are not the youngest volcanoes in the world, but hey, I was looking at them last week, and this very fuzzy photograph in the foreground, I stood in that spot approximately 25 years ago. And perhaps the disappointing thing was that those volcanoes have not changed, but I look 25 years older. So this was part of our documentary, and you can see the drone that we were flying there that was trying to capture how uncomfortable I was feeling at that point in time. But it's a truly amazing place. So we've got old rocks, we've got young rocks, and they all tell us their stories, especially those of us who are geochemists, and we are deeply interested in the secrets that those rocks hold. But of course, it's not just rocks. Here on our wonderful planet, we've got millions of different species, be they plants, animals, fungi, etc., you name it. We've got lots of them there with us. And of course, there are approximately 8.3 billion of us, human beings. And altogether, this creates an incredibly complicated and complex ecosystem that we're trying to balance and, well, basically survive, if not thrive, on our tiny little planet that is speeding through the harshness of space. It's pretty awesome. Now, we're surrounded by a lot of fairly negative news at the moment, but I thought, given the fact that it's a Friday and lots of us are thinking about perhaps the weekend or going home, I bring some good news into the room. And that is, since my grandparents were born, so I'm very lucky in that I have both of my grannies, as we would refer to them in Scotland, both of my grannies are still alive. One of them is 101, and the other one is 96. And that means I'm going to live forever. Oh yes, check those genes. But in the last 100 years, check out some of these stats. These are awesome. What we have managed to do as a global population is to reduce child mortality from 35% to 3.6% over the last 100 years. That's pretty immense in terms of that improvement. Also, our life expectancy has got much, much longer, and the percentage of people living in poverty has dramatically decreased. So those are things, I think, actually, for us to celebrate. We have managed to recognize where things weren't great, and we have managed to improve them. Now, with all of that, whilst this is a fantastic improvement, it does give us, in the raw material space, a little bit of a problem, because it means that we need a lot of stuff. We've got a growing global population, and it's not just growing, we're also getting richer. So we all expect to have more things in our lives, more technology, more energy for us to consume. And in order for that to be a possibility, we need to be able to have in circulation, be it from primary sources or secondary sources, so dug out the ground or through recycling, kept in circulation, a vast amount of stuff. Now, some of that is pretty bog standard, things like iron ore and bauxite, so aluminum, as we might say over here on this side of the Atlantic. But of course, we've got all those exciting little elements, etc., as well, that are the ones that are creating such a stir at the current point in time. So where do we need all of this? Well, we need it in things like wind turbines. And did you know you need 2 tons of rare earth elements in a single wind turbine? And this is just a little one. This is a 3-megawatt one. That's huge. When you think about the effort that has to go into not only finding those rare earth elements, but extracting them from the ground and then processing them. As many people in this room know much better than I, it is very, very, very difficult to try and separate one rare earth element from another because they are so similar to one another. Yet, we need vast volumes of these in things like wind turbines all the way through to the little magnets that make those windows in our cars go up and down. Some things might be more vital than others. So where do they come from? Well, they come from all over the world. And this, of course, is dictated by where the rocks have formed, where those materials, where those elements have been concentrated by Earth's natural processes. That dictates where we get this stuff from initially, where we're digging it out the ground. And of course, life is not fair, because our wonderful Earth processes has meant that the likes of the DRC has a huge amount of cobalt. Or if you go to Brazil, that's got the lion's share of the world's niobium. From a lithium perspective, of course, depending on how we want to extract it, you go to either Chile or Australia. But then when it comes to things like being able to process a lot of this stuff, you'll notice that there's a very large pie chart here on this world map. And of course, this is what China gets up to. And China has done the most amazing thing over the last 45 years or so, and that is called execute on its mineral strategy, whilst the rest of us didn't do very much. And what China has done is not only been able to understand these natural resources, but more than that, really become experts in how do you process them. Because it's one thing knowing where those rocks are in the ground. It is another thing working out how do we concentrate those materials further so that we can actually use them. So where do we do that processing? And if you go to China, you can actually do a bachelor's degree in rare earth elements. So if you look at the education, you look at the focus that has been going on in different parts of the world, no wonder we get distributions of where those raw materials are coming from that look like this. It is no accident that we see this. So then you think, okay, so if I'm sitting in the UK, for example, and I think, well, hey, I would like some cobalt too, please, thank you very much. Well, if I can't dig it out of the ground with my own rocks, what can I do? Well, I could, of course, recycle it. But we have a problem here as well, in that whilst we're quite good at recycling some things, like aluminum, glass, etc., we're not very good at recycling the majority of those materials that we need. And this diagram here shows us for something as normal as copper, what you can see over here on the right-hand side is apparently we lose 57% of the world's copper that we have in circulation on an annual basis. How can you lose 57% of the copper? Where does it go? Does it just vanish? Or do we just lose track of it? So you think, okay, so if I need lots more copper in circulation, surely I just fix the recycling conundrum. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, because if we look at our projections for how much copper we will need in the future, even if we magically find that 57% that we're currently losing, it doesn't allow that supply of copper to meet the demand that we are projecting. So what does this mean? It means that we still need to go and find copper in the ground. We need to be able to work out where it is and how we can extract it in a responsible way. So this whole supply-demand conundrum, i.e. we've got a growing population in the world, lots of us want more stuff, and of course, with all of that, yeah, we're not dying, and we're losing 57% of our world's copper on a regular basis. What does this mean? Well, this takes us into that world of critical minerals. So lots of us in this room, we all know those diagrams that I've already shown you. In fact, I've probably shown these diagrams to the authors of those diagrams, so thank you very much on behalf of all of us for putting them together. But the world's politicians have woken up to this over the last few years, and they've woken up to it because somebody invented the term critical minerals, which really annoys me. Because all minerals are critical, no? And we can then dive into the fact of whether they're all minerals, etc. We can begin to pick all of that kind of stuff apart. But you know what? In this world of trying to engage people who are those decision makers, if they want to call them critical minerals or critical materials, fine. Let's let them have it for the moment. And almost every government around the world has commissioned some sort of study to say which materials are critical to us. So this diagram that's up on the screen at the moment, this is the critical minerals list for the UK. so where I'm from. Now, if you look at the list of materials that are critical to, say, Europe, apparently we're different to Europe now. There was that thing called Brexit. I don't know. We'll see what happens next with regards to that one. So in Europe, there is a slightly different critical minerals list, which is different to Canada, the US, Australia, etc., you name it. And that is because every country, of course, has a slightly different demand or mix of materials that it needs in order to feed its own industries and keep itself going. And that is what's depicted by the UK economic vulnerability against, okay, what is that global supply risk? So are we dependent on a single country or a certain region for that particular material? And how much do we actually need it? That's basically what feeds these critical minerals lists. Now, with those critical minerals lists, they then drive a whole load of conversations. Generally, a lot of politicians have been getting to grips with the periodic table. I'm sure lots of us have received phone calls to say, what is the difference between a critical mineral and a rare earth element, or are they rare minerals? Okay, we've managed to get past some of that at the moment. But everybody is beginning to talk about all of this. And as a result, they're trying to say, okay, if we need to get better at processing all of this, but also, where do we go and find this stuff in the first place? And you say, oh, well, it comes from the mining industry. And they say, isn't the mining industry really evil and wicked and wrong and causes all these disasters? And then you say, right, let's take a deep breath. Let's try and understand what really goes on within the mining sector, which, of course, is the industry that tends to produce all of those primary raw materials, or certainly a lot of them. So for a successful mine, you need three things. Firstly, you need some rock in the ground. No matter how much the financial experts, etc., try and persuade me, there is absolutely no point in trying to extract rock that isn't there. You'd be amazed how many times people say, but can't we just synthesize it? I don't know. You've developed something that I haven't come across yet. So yeah, it all starts off with, where is that rock and can we actually extract it from the ground? Secondly, we need demand for that rock and somebody willing to finance the whole endeavor. But then thirdly, we need to be thinking about the environmental and the social aspects, so sustainability. And this third aspect is perhaps the area that has been changing the fastest over the last few years, because the world has started to say, yeah, we need these materials, but we want them to be sourced in the right way, in a responsible way. So what does that actually look like when we're trying to picture it as a whole? So if we look at a traditional mining value chain, and yes, I am very proud of that helicopter flying in on this slide. I thank you very much. Mining as a sector is split into different bits. You have the exploration sector and the mining sector, and they're very different industries. There are very few exploration companies that actually ever want to dig anything out of the ground. They will tell you they do, but they don't really. An exploration company is all about collecting data, trying to understand it, and then sell a story. And that's what happens at conferences like PDAC that happen just down the road in Toronto every year, where 30,000 people get together and try and sell one another stories. That's what happens within the exploration sector. And it's really exciting because all the way at the beginning of this value chain, of this story, the world is your oyster. So what kind of material are you looking for? How do you want to dig it out the ground? What kind of other prerequisites do you need in order to be able to sell that story to somebody else? And so as a result, the ownership, and I say ownership very loosely here, of that asset generally goes from a geologist or a prospector to a slightly larger organization, and on it goes. So you have different stage gates that particular patch of land generally flows through. Now, with all of this, traditionally, and I'm saying this traditionally underlined in big capital letters, there are some organizations where at that stage, that geologist just cares about the rocks. They don't care about anything else. They don't care about their lunch. They don't care about what might happen next. They just care about the rocks. And I suspect there are one or two people in this room who also just care about those fluid inclusions. Oh yeah, we just care about those rocks. But the problem that we find is that if you are just caring about the rocks and you're not taking things like environmental, social, infrastructure, all the different aspects that you need to come together to have a successful mine, if you don't take that into account early enough, then it is extremely unlikely that that patch of land that you're looking at the moment will turn into a mine. There are some horrific statistics, one of which is of 1,000 exploration projects, only one of them is successful. Now, that either tells us that exploration geologists are terrible at their jobs, or it suggests that many of those 1,000 projects shouldn't be projects in the first place, because they're not including a number of those other aspects. And with all of this takes a huge amount of time. I've been fairly bullish with this slide here, because I've said it takes 10 years to find something. There are plenty of exploration geologists who never find anything at all. And that's not because they are bad at what they do. It's just that they haven't been looking in the right place, or they haven't interpreted data sets in a way to say, hey, there might be a mine underneath our feet. I then said, okay, it takes 5+ years to go from discovering that rock to actually opening that mine. Actually, on average, it takes 18 years to go from discovering that there might be rock of a decent concentration in that ground, plus all those other factors, and then we might be able to open a mine. It takes us 18 years to often spend well over $6 billion to open a mine. So you're asking investors and everybody else to trust you to a massive degree, because they are not going to get any return on that investment for, say, 18 years. It's huge. Then, of course, that life of mine might be 30 years plus, if we're lucky. But then we go into the phase that often results in a big question mark. And this is one of the reasons why mining has a really big problem along the lines of trust with many different stakeholders around the world. And that is because this part that often is referred to as being closure, nobody really knows how to do it. And as a result, it either doesn't get done, or it gets done pretty badly, because we've run out of money and we don't know how to be able to do it. Now, this is our traditional mining value chain. If we tweak this a little bit and say what we're not aiming at here is closure, we're actually saying what happens with that patch of land as we go into that post-mining landscape. And ideally, we've used the fact that we've extracted that wealth from the ground to act as a catalyst for societal development, aspects of environmental improvement, etc. So what does that look like? And with this, as soon as we start saying we're not aiming at digging a hole in the ground, we're actually aiming at using those natural resources to enhance society, to enhance the environment, now the mine becomes a really, really long timescale construction project. And this changes things, because it means that we are aiming at something slightly different. What this also allows us to do is to project what do we think the value is with regards to those mining projects, be it financial, environmental, societal. And what you can see here is when we're actually mining, that's when, of course, the mine makes some money, but we are negatively impacting on the environment. It is very difficult to work out how to mine without having some sort of negative impact on the environment. However, if we're doing this properly, we should be able to build a future that, compared to before the mining project, is actually better. But that will take us 7 generations. That will take us a huge amount of time. And the difficulty is finding companies, finding governments who are willing to project that far into the future. First Nations and Indigenous people here in Canada are very good at thinking 200 years into the future. So when we're thinking about that societal development, but also the partnerships between different groups of people, it is not good enough for us just to be thinking in terms of 10, 20, 30 years, which is what we're doing in the engineering world. We need to be thinking generations into the future, because that's where a lot of the impact may well be felt from the mining activities. And with this as well, it's not just one thing that we might dig out the ground, it might be multiple things that we're digging out of the ground. And so where do we need geochemists? We need geochemists everywhere. Because geochemists not only help us to find what is in the ground and understand that rock, but also help us to make sure we aren't totally destroying the environment as we're actually doing it. And then in that post-mining landscape, making sure that we're either reprocessing those tailings, that waste that we've generated, or making things just a little bit better overall. So this diagram all looks very lovely, but actually, is it real? Or is it just me drawing things on a PowerPoint slide? Well, let me take you to Brazil. And this is an asset that I was lucky enough to live and work on a number of years ago. It is carbonatite. So the rocks are beautiful. Okay, they're not as good as meteorites, but we'll put that to one side. Okay, so they're carbonatites, really exciting rocks. It's in the middle of Brazil, this particular asset. And so let's just imagine this kind of cube of land and say, well, how does this cube of land change as we go through time? So to start with, so let's call this 60 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. This is a beautiful natural environment. There's a rainy season, there's a dry season, and there are lots of toucans flying through the air, some snakes slithering along the ground, and that's more or less it. And then you have those farmers that come along, either with or without their tractors. Note there is a theme of tractors in this presentation here today. So you've got your farmers with or without tractors that are there doing their thing. They said, okay, actually, this has got a good environment. There's some nice soil. I can grow stuff here. Okay, that's how I can make my living, my survival. And then one day, somebody came along and went, oh, look, there's some niobium in the ground. They didn't quite go straight to niobium. They found a diamond in the local river. And so that then attracted other geologists who came along and said, nah, diamonds, they're just carbon. Let's go and look for something that's more exciting. So what they found here is they found some niobium, but within that carbonatite complex, it wasn't just niobium, they also found phosphate. Now, niobium, of course, is good with steel. It makes it much stronger, and you can do different things with it. But phosphate is great for fertilizer. And given the fact that we're in a farming environment, that fertilizer plus farmers meant the farmers could rapidly improve what they were growing in the ground. This then allows us to do things like we can attract more people into this area. Because of the mining activities, we need to build infrastructure, such as power cables, we have a railway line. All of this stuff is beginning to go on, and you can see how our little cube of land is going through quite a lot of change at this point in time. Now, this asset, they actually got a lot of their heat that they needed for the processing of their phosphate from biofuel, so they were planting trees, all of this kind of stuff going on. Then what happens? Well, because you've got your farming, John Deere, that's the green tractor, John Deere decides to build a tractor factory in this area. And then Mitsubishi go, hang on a second, people need four-wheel drive trucks as well. We will build a car factory in this area. And so suddenly the population has gone from like 100 disparate farmers across the landscape to 60,000 people living in this area, all catalyzed by extracting material from the ground. And you can see here, we've got this big pit that is beginning to form, but with time, we run out of rock. So we've exhausted where that phosphate has been concentrated to high enough extent so that it makes sense to dig it out the ground. So we need to go into a closure phase with the mine. But what about the 60,000 people who live there? What are they going to do? Well, the good news is we've got the tractor factory, we've got Mitsubishi, we've got all the farming in the local community. So actually, everyone's decided they don't really want to work in mining anyway. They want to go and drive tractors instead. I don't know, or maybe sell them, whatever the case might be. So this is something where the mine begins to close. What do you do with that infrastructure? Well, maybe we can close that mine, repurpose some of that infrastructure, perhaps turn it into a recycling facility. I should say I'm now in imagination land because this mine is still open at the moment. But a lot of these plans are very much on the table. So what we have here is this little cube of land progressing through time and experiencing all of these changes that us as human beings are imposing on it. But being really honest, did we actually plan any of this out in advance? What do you reckon? No, of course we didn't. This all happened by chance, and the mining companies who are working there were just very lucky that the tractor company, et cetera, decided that they wanted to come and play as well. But what does this do for this patch of land? Well, again, if we try and say, look at this through the eyes of both finance, but also environmental value, social value, and we say, right, all the way back at the beginning where we had some farming, some forestry, of course there was value there, but perhaps there wasn't a huge amount, especially from an economic perspective, that finance perspective. But then through time, we begin to collect data sets. So exploration now increases the value of that land, because now we think we've got niobium, phosphate, et cetera, in the ground. We haven't dug anything out yet, but the sheer act of collecting that data, interpreting it, and talking about it has increased the perceived value of that land. And note as well, that's not just financially, it's also environmentally, because we understand more about it. We then build things like railways, roads, because when it comes to actually digging material out the ground, we rely on that in order to be able to get the raw materials to the marketplace. So what we've got here is we might have some aggregates. Of course, we have our niobium, our phosphates. We also then have things like our tractor factory, our car factory coming online. Because it's a carbonatite, we might also have things like titanium, rare earth elements, copper. There's always copper at depth. If an exploration geologist doesn't know what they're talking about, they will say there is copper at depth. Very rarely should you believe them. But it's what they are hoping to find at the bottom of that very, very deep drill hole. Okay, so what we might find there is some copper, for example. And then what about carbon capture storage? Things like that, because a mining company is expert at landscaping, at using that rock, at doing different things with those materials. So what else can we pump in here? And as well, because we are improving the farming, we're improving those land practices that remove to more regenerative agriculture, et cetera. So what you can see is through this human-induced activity, we are improving the perceived value of that land, not just financially, but also socially and environmentally as well. And that is what mining can bring to various parts of the world. But it doesn't just happen in isolation. You need to look at that mining in concert with a whole load of other factors. So if you've just got your exploration geologist, a mining engineer, and a metallurgist, actually you need other people to come into the mix who can say, well, what about all this other stuff that we might be able to trigger in terms of those areas of development? So this is a case of thinking about those patches of land, be it here in Montreal, or be it at home where everybody is looking forward to going home to later on today, or be it, I don't know, what is the value of your laboratory where you're doing all of your work? So what does that value really mean to you? So if you can be picturing that in your mind right now, when you think of that patch of land, so one of those places that you go to, you might take your family there, or it might be that special place for you. Why is that place special? Why is that place valuable to you? And of course, we can go and look at it from different angles of the geology, of different aspects of the environment. If we're being brave, we can ask ChatGPT and realize that our jobs are safe, because that is an awful diagram. If that's what AI thinks the Earth is made of, then yeah, we've still got jobs. Or we can go and ask school children. So I've done this exercise a lot. To start with, it's always great to see who can draw a cube, because that, of course, is a skill in itself. But what do school children, what do university students think is valuable in land? And with all of this, I think it's just great if someone just writes awesome across the top of a piece of paper. You will always get an extra mark from me. But this is a case here where lots of people have different perceptions with regards to what is valuable. Now, we, as scientists, we can measure a lot of this stuff. We can put numbers on a lot of it. But a lot of these different aspects of value are really, really difficult to articulate. So depending on who you go and speak to, they will probably give you a different articulation of why that patch of land is valuable. And we've all been trained to think about land in a slightly different way. I know when I'm thinking about my farm in the northeast of Scotland, despite the fact that I'm a scientist, I'm a geologist, I can picture how all of those different atoms are connected together and the laws of physics that make things real, all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, there's this like weird magic of emotion where I can almost feel the energy in the toes of my feet. When I think about when I go home, there's some weird attachment. And I, by no means, am the best person to be able to articulate it. But what we did was, with all of this means that everybody has a perception with regards to value of the land. They have a perception with regards to raw materials, and a perception with regards to where those materials should be coming from, and perceptions of the mining industry. And this takes us into a documentary that we made last year, where we invited 100 people to come to the Natural History Museum in London, which is an awesome building. And we asked them if they agreed or disagreed with a whole series of different statements that included things like, I believe we need raw materials for the energy transition, yes or no. I believe that mining is good or bad, what do you think? And it was absolutely amazing what we found. So I'm now going to attempt to play a little bit of a trailer of this documentary.
Action. Every single one of us relies on raw materials in order to survive. We've got 100 people who come from all aspects of society. How much do they know about the complexity and the diversity of minerals and metals that you need in something like a battery, in wind turbines and solar cells, but also in things like ventilators and also computer chips? Do people think that it is important to have the technology at any cost? Or actually, is it more important to make sure that we try not to extract any more materials out of the ground?
To understand a bit more about raw materials, how about a game? Go! You need 300 tons of steel.
We need between now and 2050 as much copper as we have mined throughout the whole of history.
We didn't have electric vehicles 20 years ago. We need to be able to generate power, and at the same time, we need to be able to save lives. Do we have enough to build all of these pieces of technology?
No. What I think is really important in this study is to make people aware of consequences of choices.
How can we make sure we do have the materials we need? We could recycle, we could mine, we could substitute. How easy is it for us to change our behaviours?
No one country on Earth has all the materials it needs. So this is very much a global problem. We need them not only for the energy transition, but actually the future of how we want to live on this planet.
It's incredible how much we need, and I'm actually quite shocked.
What is the true cost of our dependency on raw materials, and how will it shape the future of humanity?
So the real documentary is only half an hour long, so that will take you a couple of drinks to get through it. But what we did with this was not only did we engage with 100 volunteers who really did have no idea why they were there, and they did come from all walks of life. We had teachers through to musicians, you name it. And during the course of this, what was really exciting was them not only discovering and becoming more curious about raw materials, but also beginning to share their perceptions of value and also their concerns with regards to how these materials are sourced. This documentary, we've been incredibly lucky, we've won awards with it, but also we've managed to get in front of people who might otherwise not have any interest in rocks, materials at all. We've managed to get people talking about it. This is an output from one of the Horizon Europe projects called Vector, and I think the impact that we're seeing off the back of telling this story in a slightly different way, there's a whole load of science in the documentary, but we don't make the documentary about science. We make it about the 100 people and the journey that they go through. Now, one of the aspects that we learnt with regards to this is that when people are perceiving value in terms of raw materials, they either are looking at, do we have the material that we need? So do I have the lithium that I need in my electric car battery or whatever it might be? So that's usually the perceived value from somebody who's a long, long way away from where the material is dug out the ground. But the other aspect of value is what happens to that patch of land after you have extracted the rock. And what often gets forgotten by the millions of different standards and expectations that we have within the mining sector is that part. Most of those standards tend to follow the metal. So we have things like battery passports, etc. And increasingly, people are using isotope combinations, etc., to understand where certain metals have actually come from around the world. The bit that we're not so good at the moment is really understanding what has been changing with regards to that patch of land. Now, we can use satellites, we can use a whole load of ground-based data collecting sensors, etc., to help us understand it. But the reason why we know we need to get better at understanding what is going on with that land from which we are extracting materials is this. This is a study by GlobeScan. They've done it a couple of times now. But this is the data from 2025, where they went and asked 30,000 people from around the world, do you trust these different sectors? Now, has anybody found mining yet? Oh, yes. Mining is less trusted than alcohol, than oil and gas, than packaged food and snacks, beer. Shall I keep going? Now, last time I checked, we don't necessarily need, I don't know, you could argue with me on some of these, we don't necessarily need things like spirits and alcohol in our lives. But we do need those minerals and metals that come from the mining sector. So there's a big problem here in terms of mining. And that problem is that concept of trust. So I might be a physical scientist, but I spend a lot of time with social scientists. And once you get past the language and the terminology barriers, one of the things that they have very much taught me is about you can take something as nebulous as trust and actually break it down into understandable frameworks. And that helps me in my scientific brain, because now I go, okay, now I actually understand it. It's not just a word or a feeling or an emotion. I can now understand how to get it to work. And trust generally consists of three component parts. First, do you have the ability or the competence to deliver on what it is you say you're going to do? So, are you competent? Number two, do you have integrity? And by that, we mean, do you actually deliver on what you say you're going to do? So do you actually do it? And then the third aspect, which is perhaps the most difficult, is benevolence. So what is in it for you? Why are you doing it? Do people believe that you're doing it for the best intentions, or do they think you're doing it just to get rich, or something like that? So once you start breaking mining down into these three components of trust, we can begin to understand why things aren't working very well. But we know what the answers are. So from a mining perspective, generally mining companies are quite good at getting material out the ground. They're not very good at delivering it on time or on budget. So for a $6 billion project, generally it balloons out to something like $20 billion. The big difficult bit is the benevolence. Very few people believe that a mining company is doing it for the right reasons. And they certainly don't believe them when those mining companies say, we're not doing it for the copper we're extracting now, actually we're doing it to unlock this social development for the far distant future. Nobody believes them when they say that. And actually, to be honest, they've got a point, because very few mining companies are doing it for the far distant future. But we hold in our hands some solutions. And those solutions look a little bit like this, in that we know how mining should be done better and what we should really be aiming at. So we should be aiming at that more developed future. We should be aiming at extracting all the material from the ground, not just the stuff that is really juicy at the moment. So at the moment, we open and we design mines to extract quite high concentrations of copper. And by building mines that look like that, it means we can't then go in and get lower concentrations of copper later, or perhaps the molybdenum or the gold or all those other materials that are in the ground alongside that copper. So we shoot ourselves in the foot with regards to that. Also, with regards to what we leave behind, we know that we shouldn't be building conventional tailings dams anymore. We know that they fail and they cause massive disasters, and actually they leave whoever is left holding the can with a massive and very expensive liability. Whilst it is more expensive in the short term to build filtered tailings, paste tailings, it is much cheaper in the long term to have that waste organized in a much better way. There's no reason why we couldn't take all the sulfides out of that waste and put them into their own special place, meaning that the rest of the waste isn't as difficult to deal with. The reason why we don't do it at the moment is because it's more expensive up front, but we know that we should be doing it. Also as well, how do we process that material? Engineers have improved the way that they do things over the last few decades, yet as geologists and exploration geologists, we're still looking for the same rocks. We're still looking for copper porphyry deposits, for example. But engineers can process different rock. So what if we went and spoke to those engineers and said, what do you really want? And then we can go off around the world and find rocks that are in better situations, that aren't in fragile environments, etc. But at the moment, we're kind of stuck in our same old way of doing it. And then finally, mining companies love owning the land on which they are working. But should they? Should that land actually belong to the people that live there, and the mining companies come in as service providers? The mining companies wouldn't make as much money, but you know what? Their license to operate would be easier. So all of these questions are being discussed and debated right now at the moment by not just the world's mining companies, but the world's governments and everybody else. And the key thing with this is we need to work out what is it that we're actually aiming at. Are we just aiming at providing the world the copper that it needs? Or are we aiming at using the fact that there are natural resources in the ground? We're using that to act as a catalyst for societal development and environmental protection. What are we aiming at? If it's just the copper, we're going to continue to have these legacy problems. Whereas if we shift the objective of what we're trying to do, we not only get the copper, but we also can act as that greater catalyst for change within society. So to conclude, the original exam question was something along the lines of supply, demand, and tractors. Maybe I've just made up that bit there. So what is it about the supply and demand? Can we actually meet the demand for all those materials that the world is asking for? Well, from the demand side, we need to be honest about what do we actually need those materials for, but also can we reduce the demand for them? There are lots of people who feel that we should reduce the amount of materials that we need, and that would be awesome. That would be fantastic if we could do that. On the supply side, we also need to get more honest about how we expect those raw materials to be supplied, but also what we're willing to pay to achieve that. So all of this comes down to, yes, supply can meet demand, but we need all the help we can get. And from a mining sector perspective, a lot of that help comes from imaginative, creative, and brilliant geochemists who can look at those rocks and think, how could we do this differently? Of those three different areas that we need for mining, the rock in the ground, the finance, and the sustainability, the bit that you cannot change is the rock. But we can change the way we think about it and the way that we process it. But that requires all of us to use our imaginations and take what we have often in the academic research world and apply it in that world of industry. Because otherwise, the world of mining is just going to carry on doing what it's always done. So with that, this is my call to action for a room full of the world's most brilliant geochemists and beyond. If you are somebody who likes understanding how rocks formed, how planets formed, all the way through to what makes that tiny little bit of rock slightly different to that tiny little bit of rock, going all the way through into the environmental aspects, how do we protect the environment, how do we enhance the environment, this is where the world of raw materials needs you right now, because the mining industry is failing right this second and needs new people to come into it to help do things differently and ultimately make sure that the world continues to look as beautiful as it is in many parts of the world. So with that, I will say thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sarah. That was great. That was a call to action and inspirational. We have a few minutes now for people to ask questions. Please come up to the mic. And I think we can start over here.
Thanks for a thought-provoking and very informative lecture. I want to ask you about your opinion about something you mentioned briefly at the beginning and didn't expand on, and that's something that I would love to hear more about, and that's the recycling component. 50% of the material is gone, not used, not recycled, and we're willing to dig more holes and extract more and dump 50% of that. I realize that's not a mining industry, that's a different industry. Why don't we encourage the geochemists here to try and focus on trying to reuse these metals?
I absolutely agree with you. It's a fantastic question. And this is something where, so recycling is hard, and it's made hard in part because we design things like cars to be built really quickly. We don't design them to be stripped apart very easily. And there's lots of research that's going on at the moment to say, how quickly can you take a car apart? But also as well, we've got really good at making amazing alloys that are then absolutely impossible or very difficult to pull apart as well. So a lot of this then comes down to currently, what are the economics of the recycling market? So if you look at steel, the lowest quality of steel is rebar. And so that's the stuff that goes inside the concrete in all of our buildings to give it a bit more strength. Now, the percentage of copper, nickel, et cetera, in rebar, so there is 0.32% copper in rebar. We are digging rock out the ground at 0.6% or less at the moment. There's 0.42% nickel in rebar. Now, that says to me exactly as you're saying, just because we cannot get the economics of the recycling of steel to be efficient enough so I can pull out the copper and the nickel and the niobium and everything else, which, oh, by the way, is on the critical minerals list. Actually, maybe if we focus in on those areas, either to make it more efficient from a science perspective, but then also economically, if we need to apply subsidies for something like recycling rather than opening a new mine, does that make more sense? Right now, there are a number of facilities, say, in Europe for recycling of, say, lithium. None of them are economic. And so people have been teeing things up, and they've been going bust almost immediately. So we're at that really interesting tipping point right now where we need science and innovation to help us get more efficient, but also the politicians and the economics to change that side of the equation as well. Great question. Thanks.
Hi. Thanks for the great lecture. I'm wondering, what are the current policies in place for mining remediation in terms of do they allow a land that has seen a mine and a closure of a mine? Is that enough to put a regenerative farm? And if not, if those current closing of a mining policies are not enough to open a farm, who's supposed to cover that cost? Like, I don't think a farmer with 10 pigs and 10 chickens running around will have the money to pay to remediate that land to those levels.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So currently, it's different depending on where you are in the world. So if you are wanting to open a mine, you usually need to put some funds into a bond. And so that's your closure fund. The problem is that that fund is never big enough to be able to pay for what comes next. The other problem is that if you did put the right sum of money into that fund, you can't get the economics to start mining in the first place, because you need to be able to produce that metal at a maximum cost. So that's a problem as well. But when we go into the regulation and the policy side, every country does it differently. And what often happens is it's not necessarily the farmer that picks up the cost, it's the government. In the UK right now, the UK government, or I should say the UK taxpayer, i.e. me, plus a few other people, we spend £6 billion every year just cleaning water coming out the bottom of mines. We're not fixing the problem, we're just cleaning water. That's it, which means that we're going to be spending 6 billion, 7 billion, 8 billion every year forever and ever. Now, is that fair on us as the taxpayer, or should the oil mining companies go back and fix it? The problem is they've all gone bust. They've disappeared. So it's a difficult conundrum. The final thing to mention there is waste. governments around the world have gone totally mad with regards to how they classify waste. And often if something is classified as waste, or even worse, hazardous waste, it's very difficult to then get permission to go back and do something with it. So all the companies and research projects as well that are looking at the reprocessing of tailings or waste from mining are butting up against this problem, which is just a piece of paper. It's just a regulation, so it's quite easy from a physical perspective to change it, but they're butting up against regulations that are there to try and protect people with regards to hazardous waste, but it means that we cannot fix the kind of root causes of those problems. So I don't think I quite answered your question, but it is complicated, and the regulations are improving, but they're not where we need them to be yet.
Perhaps we just need to think better and change those policies, but that takes a lot.
Well, exactly, and I think this is it. So a lot of the research that we do is all about very specific on the science end. But we cannot enact this change without political scientists, lawyers, etc., doing their bits as well, and all those other people who can change those regulations and create that ecosystem and that broader environment in which we can get that change to happen. Really good point. Thanks.
Just a comment and then a question.
Yeah.
Fine line between maintaining wastes as potential resources in the future and using that as an excuse to not reclaim. We see this in the upstream oil and gas industry. Thousands and thousands of wells are kept open because, there might be something there that's worth something someday, and it's used as an excuse to never abandon and reclaim those mines. But the question that I had was, as you were going through your presentation, I could think of dozens of examples in my home province of Alberta of mines that have been done improperly. I'm wondering if you have an example of a mining project that you could point to that says, this is a way that we might be able to achieve what you're presenting here in the future, somebody that's already doing it.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and thank you very much for your comment there as well. So the problem that we have is that we've been mining for thousands of years. So we've created an absolute mess all around the world, and that's what we see, and that's what a lot of people think about when they think of mining. Some of the more modern mines, so ones that have been built very recently, that's where the regulations explicitly around mining have really helped to say, you cannot leave this disaster behind you. And so a lot of the new mines that are either just come online or still being built, they are being designed with this future case in mind, to an extent. And the problem we've got is that when you go through different stage gates of projects, you generally have, once you found something in the ground, you then do a pre-feasibility study that says, this is what we think we might be able to do here. That pre-feasibility study isn't necessarily to get people excited about that area, it's to raise money. And so for that pre-feasibility study, you then raise enough money to then do a feasibility study, etc. The problem with this is that nobody wants to spend more than $6 billion on a mine. In reality, it's going to cost $20 billion. So we need to put $20 billion as the price tag into those early studies, because that is what is going to allow us to do it properly. But that's not happening at the moment. We've got a big problem with the investors. The governments are beginning to wake up to this. And so what you've got, especially in places like British Columbia, are probably the most advanced understanding of free and prior informed consent with regards to Indigenous and First Nations people, also understanding the environmental aspects and what then needs to go into that design and plan, not just for the mine itself, but for at least 7 generations into the future. So it's beginning to happen. Can I point my finger at an asset where there hasn't been something that's gone wrong? It's really difficult. There are some good assets out there, and for example, in Peru, where I've just been, lots of studies point their fingers at Quellaveco, which is a very new copper mine. Are there problems with that design? Yes, there are, but they designed it in partnership with many other people from that area, including the government, including different farmers, and really interestingly, a group that was called the illegal water users. which was awesome because they were taking water illegally out of streams, but they saw partnering with the mine and the mine design to say, well, actually, if we merge these two water streams together, that then means there's enough water flow so that the water isn't becoming contaminated just by the rocks that it's flowing over. So all of these things here, it points the finger to these mines taking longer than 18 years to design and build because it needs a huge amount of consultation, and it needs people to be able to come together from an engineering background, a social background, and actually be able to understand one another and collaborate rather than just say, I'm going to tell you as a stakeholder what I'm going to do, because that doesn't work. Again, I haven't really answered your question, but I've just put more problems on the table. Thank you. It's my friend who laughed at my first joke. Thank you very much.
Hey, you got it. You got it. So, question about your original data.
Yeah.
Does it include the military for critical minerals? Or like if the military, if for some great progress we got rid of military and war, what percent is that? And then I have another thought also, which is with 2 tons of rare earths for each wind turbine, how much nuclear fuel? Because right, rare earths come with thorium, and so is there this connection between the atomic energy and wind that no one's really talking about? And then I had another thought also about asteroid mining. Like where are we with that?
Okay.
So, thanks.
So we've got three questions there. We're going to be here until tomorrow. This is great. Okay, so military use. The only country that perhaps was truthful about the military requirements of raw materials before the last year or so was the US. Because the US did talk about the energy transition within those government forums, but it was always security of supply with a big angle on military requirements. What has happened over the last year is that everybody else has started to do the same. So, which is concerning because you think the energy transition is pretty important, as are data centers, et cetera, that again are rising up and need a lot of material. One of the reasons why the demand for copper is so great is because you put copper on the front end of a missile. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't just fire those at one another? Like, what a waste. But this is something here where what you're beginning to see is a tweak in terms of people. I came across something yesterday. It's a German company, and their strapline is from minerals to missiles. That gets a certain reaction out of me, but that's my perception. And I'm allowed to have that perception, and they are allowed to have their perception, and that's okay. So yes, there is a huge demand from a defense angle or from a military perspective. Lots of governments around the world have now cottoned onto this and are getting much more, they concentrate a lot more on it compared to where they were before. In terms of people saying, is it better to use copper in a missile or copper in a copper wire for whatever it might be in terms of electrification, nobody's going there yet. But there are some very interesting studies that people have done when there is a escalation in conflict, how many raw materials have just been thrown at one another. In terms of, I'm thinking about your next question, asteroid mining was your third one.
Yeah. The connection between rare earths, atomic energy, and wind.
Yeah, so I don't know is the answer, because not all rare earth deposits have thorium, et cetera, in them. They're not all radioactive. But it is a case of saying, if I'm going to extract something from the ground, should I be using all of it, or as much of it as possible? And especially with the iron absorption clays, for example, that is something where the reason why it's difficult to ship them around the world is because they do have the radioactive elements within them. And so therefore things like thorium, et cetera, could that be used? Yeah, absolutely. Is it in the right kind of format? I don't know. I don't know enough about that. Asteroid mining. I started out life studying meteorites. I then worked for various mining companies. So yes, I like being asked about asteroid mining. My answer is leave it up there, please, because as soon as we bring it down to Earth, we have this problem called gravity for when we actually want to build spaceships and blast off again. So NASA's strategy, if I'm correct, always used to be leave the stuff up there. So we know that there's a huge amount of material up there in space, but we don't really need it down here on Earth. We've got enough materials here. We don't need to be bringing stuff back from asteroids.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you so much for your very educational talk. You just mentioned a few minutes ago, but I was wondering what will be the effect or impact on the recent demand for AI data centers, and because they will use a lot of very specific materials, which I'm guessing a lot will be part of that critical raw material list. So how worse will it get, basically, with that demand?
Yeah, so a lot of the projections that I've shown you include quite a big aspect of data centers, et cetera, that are there. What we haven't yet seen within data sets is the data centers is the thrifting of materials. So if you think about a good example are using platinum group metals in catalytic converters for cars. So when we started to realize that the combustion engine actually made us as human beings and the environment not very well, that was when we thought, hang on a second, we need to do something about it. In comes the catalytic converter. The amount of platinum in those early catalytic converters was vast. So as a result, they were really, really expensive. So what do companies do? They engineer that amount of platinum all the way down to the bare minimum. What we're seeing with data centers is because we're building them so quickly, so fast at the moment, we're actually building them in a fairly scrappy way. So we're using huge amounts of material. For example, most of the data centers that are being built need vast quantities of water to cool them down. We can recycle that water really easily in those data centers, but we're not building them like that because it is faster and cheaper to build the scrappy version. So what we will get, I suspect, over time is we will get an improvement in terms of what it is we actually need in those data centers, in terms of those raw materials, and the combinations or the substitution of what you actually need in them. We're going to need a huge amount more copper, though, because that's where our electrical conductivity is. Lots of people say, well, why don't we use aluminium or aluminum? Well, it doesn't have such good properties, as we know. What we really need on that side are the material scientists to pull their socks up and get room temperature quantum materials to work, and then that then changes the game again. But they tell me that's quite difficult to get those quantum materials to work at room temperature. But that would fix a lot of that problem. Cool.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Cool.
Okay, well, let me just, I think we should thank the speaker one more time. And enjoy the rest of the meeting and have a safe travel home.
Chers invités, veuillez vous diriger vers votre salle d'atelier. La présentation débute maintenant.
Dear guests, please proceed to your breakout room. The presentation begins now.